This week on the Big Story podcast.
Coca production is at record levels. In Colombia, the price is quite low, and a lot of these local economies have collapsed.
There is no question that the drug war itself errs tremendously when it targets the lowest levels of the distribution chain, and those are the farmers.
A war that has no winners.
Mafias are always winning the war. It's like a game of cat and mouse. In one province, they'll eradicate coca. In another, they'll start growing it.
A country at the forefront of the battle.
We have lost millions of lives to drug trafficking as we continue to spend dollars, euros, and Colombian pesos in a fight that is an absolute resounding failure.
Affecting the defenseless.
I have 4 hectares of pure coca. We use it, as the saying goes, to chew, and it gives us strength and courage to work.
And bringing old truths back to life.
For us, for the indigenous peoples, coca has always been there. It has always existed before anything else, before drugs, before laws, before prohibition, and it is our duty to defend it.
Next on the Big Story podcast. Hi, I'm Joe Zarinko, a producer here at Big Story. Colombia has been at the forefront of the so-called war on drugs for over half a century. While the country has been ravaged by human, ecological, social, and material losses, cocaine production has recently reached record highs. There seems to be a growing consensus about the urgency of a new approach. For the first time in Colombian history, the last elections brought to power a progressive candidate, Gustavo Petro. Petro, a former commander of the guerrilla organization M19, has pledged to revamp the country's drug policy. Our correspondent Toby Muse went deep into the mountainous territory of rural Colombia and visited with the politicians and government officials pushing for these changes. He reports on the emerging landscape bringing about a new policy. This episode of the Big Story podcast is called Coca Growers. We start off in Santa Rosa, Sur de Bolivar, a rural area like many others in Colombia, where coca has been planted and processed into cocaine for several decades. This is the beginning of the cocaine trade. Poor young men working for less than $30 a day, picking the leaves off the native bush. They're called raspicinas, Spanish for pickers. Coca crops have been planted here and turned into cocaine for longer than these men have been alive. Meet Hector. He's showing us how to pick the leaves from the coca bush.
That's how it's done. That's how it's all done. Like this. Without damaging the stem. If you damage it, there is not enough leaves left on the bush. Treat it nicely, because it is the bush that keeps us fed. As far as I understand, it is a very illicit crop, which the government pursues a lot. As long as there's a mafia, a lot of people will live off this. Because a lot of people make a living off this to feed their families every day. A coca farmer can support 10, 20, 30 workers. A plantain farmer or someone who grows corn will have 1 or 2 workers at most. The good thing is that it supports the work for many people. I've been doing this for a while. I started picking coca when I was 14. I'm from San Jose del Guaviare, which has always been a coca region. When they finished the coca over there was nothing more to do but to come to Certe Boulevard, where coca is king. As long as coca is here, one can support themselves. If it is a good day, I can earn $35 or $40 a day, but there are some who are better than me and some who pick less than me.
It's a rite of passage for tens of thousands of young men in the Colombian countryside to pick the coca. This farm is just one of the tens of thousands that grow coca. There are 230,000 families who live off the harvest. Today, there are record coca crops in the country, despite the war on drugs being fought for more than half a century. Police have ripped this coca out, fumigated it to kill the bush, and yet there is more of the crop than ever before. And it keeps growing more and more. Ask these men who's winning the war on drugs, the authorities or the coca. The answer's clear.
It's the coca. I mean, the war has always been fought against the mafia. It's like a cat and mouse game. In one province, they'll finish the coca. In another, they'll start growing it. Since 1998, they have been killing the mafia. And I still don't think they have finished it because we are here. They've been finishing it for 25 years, and they haven't been able to do it.
In his own words, he's describing something drug experts call the balloon effect. When authorities push down in one part of the country and destroy the crops, then what tends to happen is the coca crops rise up in different parts of the country. Here's Julio, another coca picker, working on the same field.
We're tying straps around our hands so that our fingers don't get hurt on the bushes. I wasn't quite 16 or 17. It was a tough time because my mother died when I was 9 years old. So from there, my dad left.
No one thinks of the Raspuchinas as criminals. Some big narcos have started out as Raspuchinas, but most think of them as farmhands. They might be picking coffee or bananas or coca.
I've worked picking plantains, harvesting yucca, but it's not the same to be paid a day's wage swinging a machete, picking yucca compared with collecting coca, if you know what I mean. Because coca is worth more than yucca. If you plant yucca, it sells cheaply. It only gives enough to provide some food because it sells for less than it's worth. In my opinion, it's up to each person to choose what they are going to consume. You know what I mean? I have children, and I wouldn't want a child of mine to use drugs. You know what I mean? Of course, I feel guilty, but the government is more guilty because there are no alternatives to survive and to feed the family. I mean, I'm talking about something that provides more than coca. If they legalize coca, it will be the end of it, because no one would grow it because prices would be low. Imagine, nobody is buying it now. How much worse would it be if it was legal? For those reasons, I don't think it will happen.
A new generation of Colombian politicians is demanding a change in the way the war on drugs is being fought. Listen to this congresswoman from the historic PACT, the ruling party.
Over the last 30 years, we have invested a mind-numbing number of resources, time, and state policies. On top of that, large swaths of jungle forests were cut down to plant coca. We have lost millions of lives to drug trafficking as we continue to spend dollars, euros, and Colombian pesos in a fight that is an absolute resounding failure. My proposal to fight against the damage caused by the drug consumption, but also the deaths and the environmental consequences of drug trafficking, is to regulate drugs.
Like millions of her countrymen, Pizarro has been a victim of the drug war. Her father was a leading guerrilla in the rebel group M19, alongside the current president, Gustavo Petro. He was murdered as he sought peace.
My father was Carlos Pizarro Leon Gomez. He was the founder of the M19, a social democratic guerrilla group, in 1990. When my father was the commander of the M19, he led a peace agreement with the government. When my father demobilized, signing a peace agreement with the government, only 45 days passed before he was assassinated.
It's thought that powerful drug traffickers who opposed Colombia's leftist insurgents were behind the murder, perhaps working with corrupted agents of the state.
One of my father's main reasons for demobilizing was seeing the corrupting effect the drug money had on the guerrillas, weakening them. And he firmly believed that if the M19 guerrillas started trafficking drugs to finance themselves, they would lose their whole ideology. And as the president said recently, it would become a struggle, a war of greed, instead of a war for the transformation of the state.
Let's hear from Michael Shifter, a senior fellow from the Inter-American Dialogue in Washington, D.C.
There's a growing consensus of the failure of the war on drugs, even beyond that, but there's not a consensus on what to do as an alternative. Drug problem is a problem. We're going to focus just on harm reduction and public health issues, or is there anything else that we could do? Then I think, there's not agreement, and that's kind of the real challenge.
At the head of the new government's drug policy is Felipe Tascón, the drug czar. His challenge is to find a novel approach to lower the number of coca crops in Colombia. He says other crop substitution plans have failed because they replaced the crops without giving the farmers the support they needed to develop new legal crops.
The central issue to understand that it's not simply about replacing one bush with another, it's about replacing the whole production process. We have to guarantee processing and marketing.
That means creating the conditions where the legal crops are profitable and building the infrastructure like roads and bridges to get the legal crops to market.
The war is a failure. Originally, the idea was to put an end to cocaine in its raw material, coca leaves, and it has not brought results. One could almost state that the war was designed to fail. It focused on combating supply to reduce production, guaranteeing high prices with the resulting supply restrictions. In previous governments, prosecution was limited to small farmers. This is the change. For us, the small farmers are victims. If we don't speed up the process to provide them with alternatives, we run the risk of the problem happening again. We have a very large window of opportunity. We need support, not only from the institutions, but also the farming organizations themselves and international solidarity to accelerate the process of finding alternatives.
My
name is Juan Piñacue, and I'm the director of the brand Coca NASA. For us, for the indigenous people, Coca has always been there. It has always existed before anything else, before drugs, before laws, before prohibitions. And it is our duty to defend it because it is our mother, Coca, which is what gives us energy. It is what gives us power. It is what connects us with the spiritual and the ritual. Not defending it would be grave. And for this, we're ready to sacrifice our lives.
A dar la vida.
Coca is a bush native to Colombia and had been used by the indigenous for thousands of years before Europeans turned it into a drug.
La necesidad surge
We saw the need to
para-
defend the coca leaf and break the stigma that the coca is cocaine. We defend our coca and say, no, coca is not cocaine, by showing cocoa's different uses.
mostrar diferentes usos que hay a través.
During the 25 years that the company has been operating, we have been in legal limbo. During all of these years, there has always been a persecution in one way or another of the brand. From the anti-narcotics police, from the army, from the health authorities.
Narcóticos, desde el ejército, desde las autoridades sanitarias.
Coca NASA is a business formed by indigenous of the NASA community. Out of coca leaves grown in indigenous territory, they make beer, liquor, soft drinks, tea, and energy drinks. The products are sold here in their store in the Colombian capital, Bogota.
Mi sueño
My dream is that one day we will be able to say Colombia has the best tasting coca in the world. That we can overcome the discussion as to whether or not coca is cocaine or the drug. That there is no need to convince people of these basic facts. So that we can instead talk about what coca is. A powerful plant. A plant that gives energy. That we are no longer just a coffee growing country, but also a country that is proudly and honestly a coca growing country.
decirlo, cocalero.
That's all for the Big Story podcast this week. Special thanks to our colleagues Caleb Lopez and Felipe Lozano Puche here at our CGTN America studios. If you want to check out the full-length documentary, we'll drop the links in the show's notes, or you can just go to CGTN Now on Apple TV.